The story kicks off with a kid named Omri, who's heading back home from school. Once he gets there, his family has a little surprise birthday party all set up for him. Everyone gathers around and sings the birthday song for him. Right after that, Omri blows out the candles. Then his parents, Victor and Jane, hand him his gift, a brand new skateboard. Seeing this, Omri and his best buddy Patrick get super hyped. After that, his brother Gillen hands him a toy as well. A little later, his other brother, Dylan, walks in with this small wooden cupboard and tells Omri he found it just for him. Even though that cupboard looks pretty old school and ancient, Omri still digs it. But pretty soon, he realizes the cupboard is locked tight, and he doesn't have the key for it. Right then, his mom Jane mentions that she's been obsessed with collecting random keys since she was a kid, so there might just be a key in her collection that fits this exact lock. A little later, Omri and Patrick hit up the skating rink to try out the new skateboard. While they're there, Patrick hands Omri his birthday gift. It's a tiny plastic toy of a Native American warrior. Patrick tells him he couldn't afford a pricey gift, but this toy totally reminded him of Omri. Omri absolutely loves the gift and thanks his buddy. Back at the house, Omri and his mom start hunting for keys to crack open the cupboard. They try out a bunch of keys one by one, but nothing works. Suddenly, Jane finds a super special key. This was the exact key that used to belong to her grandma, and it was left behind as her very last memory before she passed away. The second Omri puts that key into the lock, it clicks right open. Now, the big question was what to actually put inside the cupboard. His mom suggests he put that little Native American toy Patrick gave him in there. Omri goes ahead and does exactly that. He places the toy inside the cupboard, locks it up, puts it right next to his bed, and crashes out for the night. The next morning, Omri is suddenly startled awake by some really bizarre noises coming from inside the cupboard. At first, he thinks he's just tripping and seeing things in a dream. But as he slowly creeps over to the cupboard and opens it, he completely freaks out, because that tiny plastic toy he locked inside last night was now officially alive. That little Native American guy was standing right there inside the cupboard. He immediately pulls out his tiny knife and starts shouting in some totally strange language. Omri can't understand a single word he's saying. Omri thinks he's still dreaming, so he reaches his hand out to try and touch the little guy. But right then, the man lunges with his knife and stabs his finger. The moment Omri feels that sharp pain in his finger, he realizes this is definitely no dream. Everything happening right in front of him is 100% real. Just then, his dad's voice echoes from downstairs. He tells him to hurry up and get ready for school. Panicking, Omri instantly slams the cupboard shut so nobody else catches sight of the little guy. After that, he heads off to school with his mom. But the entire day, only one question is looping through his mind. How on earth did a regular plastic toy actually come alive? He completely spaces out at school and can't focus at all. The very second school lets out, Omri sprints all the way back home and bolts straight to his room. But when he excitedly throws the cupboard open, the Native American inside is turned back into a regular old plastic toy. Seeing this, Omri gets totally bummed out. He figures that whatever happened this morning was probably just his mind playing tricks on him. So, he shuts the cupboard and heads downstairs to hang out with his family. Even during dinner, he looks completely out of it and stressed. His mom notices his mood and asks what's bothering him, but Omri just makes up an excuse, saying he's feeling under the weather. Hearing that, his mom takes him up to his room so he can get some rest. A little while later, Omri falls fast asleep. Then his dad lifts him up and tucks him into his own bed. But that very night, right around midnight, Omri is shocked awake once again by that exact same noise. This time, without wasting a single second, he bolts straight over to the cupboard. The moment he opens it, he discovers that the little Native American is officially alive once more. Little Bear was still totally spooked. He asks Omri if this cupboard is straight up magical. Omri says that honestly, he's starting to think so too. Hearing this, Little Bear says that everything happening to him feels like a total dream. Now Omri wants to learn more about him. That's when the little guy reveals his name is Little Bear, and he's a warrior from the Iroquois tribe. He also mentions that back in his day, in the year 1761, he teamed up with the British to fight in the war against the French. Hearing this makes Omri even more mind-blown. He asks why he's so incredibly tiny. But Little Bear fires back, saying he's not tiny at all. Omri is just the one looking like a massive giant. Slowly, he starts guessing that maybe Omri is some kind of powerful spirit or a magical being. Little Bear says he needs to head back to his own world immediately. But Omri is not down for that. He wants to hang out with him some more. Just then, Omri gets a genius idea. He places a tiny toy teepee tent inside the cupboard and locks it up. When he opens the cupboard back up, that toy tent has transformed into a real, solid hut. At first, Little Bear is pretty sketched out about going inside the hut, but he eventually gives in and steps inside. Now Omri wants to test this magic even further. He starts putting other random toys inside the cupboard to bring them to life too. But the second those toys come alive, they start aggressively brawling with each other. Seeing this, Omri instantly slams the cupboard shut, turning them right back into regular toys. Now, Little Bear is 100% convinced that this cupboard holds some serious magical power. The next morning, Little Bear wakes Omri up himself. He tells him that if this cupboard is really that powerful, then Omri could totally fetch him some essential supplies. First off, he demands weapons, but Omri shuts that down real quick. Next, Little Bear asks if he can bring King George right in front of him. But Omri just laughs and explains that his country doesn't even have a king. Throughout their chat, Little Bear keeps getting amazed by all the random things in this modern world. He asks how Omri survives without lighting a fire and how his wife cooks food. Hearing this, Omri explains that he doesn't even have a wife yet. Little Bear gets a bit sad then and mentions that his wife passed away a really long time ago. Omri feels incredibly bad for him. In the end, Little Bear decides he's down to stay here for a little while. Omri gets super stoked and promises he'll bring him a bow, some arrows, and a few tiny tools so that he can build himself a solid, sturdy home. Omri also talks about getting him a horse, but Little Bear says he actually prefers traveling on foot. A little later, Little Bear feels the cool breeze blowing in from the window. That's when Omri decides to take him outside for a quick stroll. He carefully pops Little Bear into a small box and carries him out to the backyard garden. The moment Little Bear steps onto the green grass, a massive smile lights up his face. He says it feels absolutely amazing out here. But on their way back inside, a bird suddenly swoops down out of nowhere right over the box and tries to attack Little Bear. Omri instantly jumps in to protect him and somehow manages to save his life. When they both get back up to the bedroom, Little Bear shows him that his leg got jacked up during the attack. His leg was literally bleeding. Little Bear warns him that if they don't treat this wound ASAP, things could get ugly. Hearing this, Omri rushes straight to the bathroom. He starts scrambling around looking for a bandage, but he has no clue how to treat a human being that incredibly tiny. Just then, a wild idea pops into his head. He sneaks into his brother's room and grabs an old box of toys lying around. When he gets back to his room, he digs through the box and pulls out a tiny toy military doctor. Then, he throws him into the magical cupboard and locks it tight. Just a few seconds later, when the cupboard opens up, that toy has turned into a real, living human being. That doctor's name was Tommy. But Tommy was completely freaking out because just a second ago, he thought he was in the middle of a brutal battlefield, and suddenly he's dropped into this totally bizarre world. Omri tries to cool him down. He tells him there's no need to panic, and to just look at all of this like it's a crazy dream. After that, he takes Tommy over to Little Bear so he can check out his busted leg. The second Tommy lays eyes on Little Bear, he's totally stunned because his patient is a Native American. On the flip side, Little Bear is also shocked to see that the guy treating him is a British soldier. Even though they came from two completely different worlds, they still shared a few things in common. Tommy gets straight to work and wraps a bandage around Little Bear's injured leg. Then, he even helps him stand up on his feet. Once the treatment is all wrapped up, Omri asks Tommy if he wants to get out of this strange place. But Tommy says that even though the war is terrifying, he still has to go back because people out there are counting on him. Hearing that, Omri puts him back inside the cupboard so he can return to his own timeline. Right at that moment, his mom Jane walks into the room and asks how he's feeling now. Omri smiles and says he's doing totally fine. After that, Jane tells him to come downstairs for breakfast and heads out. Once his mom leaves, Omri tells Little Bear that now he can finally build his home using the tools he swiped from his dad's workshop. But Little Bear tells him he's still going to need way more tools. Omri promises he'll hook him up with more gear. Just then, Little Bear hears Jane's voice and asks, all confused, if that's his mom. When Omri says yeah, Little Bear finds it wild and hilarious that a kid that massive still has a mom. Before heading downstairs, Omri asks him what he wants to eat. Then he heads down to the kitchen and asks his mom to whip up something different instead of their usual daily breakfast. Jane thinks this is a little weird, but she goes along with it anyway. A little later, Omri comes back up to his room with the food and shares the meal with Little Bear. Little Bear is super touched by this and thanks him. Then Omri mentions that he's got to head out to school now. Little Bear has no clue what school even means. So Omri explains that it's a place where kids go to learn all kinds of new stuff. Hearing this, Little Bear advises him that he should also be learning about his ancestors and their history. Before leaving, Omri hands him a few tiny tools, including a miniature axe, so he can finish up working on his house. That day at school, the teacher asks all the kids to write a story about a topic they find interesting. When it's Omri's turn, he tells the whole class that he owns a magical cupboard that can actually bring toys to life. All the kids in class just think it's a super creative, fun story. The teacher even praises him for his awesome imagination. But Patrick smells something fishy. He starts suspecting that Omri might actually be telling the truth, and that he's talking about the exact toy he gave him for his birthday. After school wraps up, Omri walks past a place hosting a Native American cultural exhibition. Right there, he spots a tiny Native American figurine. He secretly swipes that figurine and swaps it out with a different toy. After that, he hightails it back home. Once he gets back and walks into his room, he sees that Little Bear has completely finished building his tiny house. Seeing this makes Omri incredibly happy. Then he shows him the new figurine he took from the school exhibition. Omri's plan was to bring this figure to life, take his bow and arrows, and then just return him right back to where he found him later. But the moment he locks the figurine inside the cupboard and opens it back up, the man actually comes alive. Seeing a massive giant of a human in front of him, the little guy completely panics from fear. Omri quickly tries to take his weapons away so he doesn't accidentally hurt anyone. But the man suddenly collapses to the ground from sheer panic and stops moving entirely. Omri has no clue what just happened. Little Bear walks over, takes a close look at him, and then delivers the bad news. The man is dead. Hearing this, Omri instantly starts blaming himself, thinking that he's the one responsible for this guy's death. Seeing him freak out, Little Bear tells him they need to bury the man with proper respect. But Omri was so terrified that his brain was totally frozen. Little Bear looks at him and asks, "Don't people die in your world?" Omri replies, "They do, but I've never seen someone die right in front of my own eyes." Then Little Bear explains that the best move right now is to send the man back to his own world. After that, Omri asks him where he even was before he got brought to life. Little Bear explains that he was guiding his nephew through the forest. According to their tradition, young boys have to learn to survive alone for a bit to become strong and responsible men. Then he drops some serious wisdom on Omri. He tells him that humans should never mess around with magic that they don't fully understand. Hearing those words, Omri starts realizing that he made a massive mistake without thinking things through. Just then, his dad Victor calls out for him from downstairs. Omri puts the dead man back into the cupboard and turns him right back into a regular toy. Before stepping out of the room, he asks Little Bear if he's mad at him, but this time Little Bear stays dead silent. When he gets downstairs, Victor asks him where all the tools that went missing from the workshop ended up. Since he doesn't have the guts to tell the truth, Omri tells a lie and claims he buried them somewhere. Victor doesn't really get his logic, but he doesn't grill him with more questions either. Instead, he hands him some cash and tells him to go buy some fresh tools. Omri takes the money and heads out toward the store. But along the way, a bully corners him, swipes all his cash, and bolts. Omri couldn't even defend himself or get his money back. Feeling totally helpless, he just sits down on the side of the road. A little while later, Patrick rolls up. He's holding a tiny cowboy toy that he wanted to pair up as a buddy for Omri's Native American toy. When he sees Omri looking so depressed, he decides to walk back home with him. Once they get back, both of them head straight up to Omri's room. But the sight inside makes Omri completely stress out. His brothers are crowding around, staring right at the tiny house Little Bear built, while the family's pet mouse is running loose all over the room. Omri was terrified that someone would find out about Little Bear, so he quickly shoos his brothers out of the room. Once the room is finally clear, he finds Little Bear hiding out under a drawer. Little Bear straight up tells him that he wants to go back to his own world right now. He was scared that if he stayed here any longer, something terrible would happen to him. But Omri reassures him that he's totally safe and nothing is going to hurt him. Right then, Patrick walks in. The absolute second he sees Little Bear walking and talking, his jaw literally drops. Now Omri has 0 ways left to hide the truth. He shows Patrick the magical cupboard and explains the whole situation. He also warns him that while the cupboard can bring toys to life, they can also straight up die. Hearing this gets Patrick insanely hyped. Now he wants to try out the magic himself. But Omri refuses to let him touch the cupboard. A little later, his dad calls for him from downstairs again, and he steps out of the room. But the moment Omri leaves, Patrick completely ignores what he said. He secretly grabs his cowboy toy and its horse and stuffs them both inside the cupboard. A few moments later, both toys come alive for real. The horse starts wilding out immediately and kicks the cowboy right out of the drawer. At that exact moment, Omri walks back into the room. He lunges forward just in time and catches the cowboy before he hits the floor. Patrick is just watching all this, completely mind-blown and thrilled. Just then, that little cowboy pulls out his pistol and fires a shot. The bullet is so tiny that it doesn't harm anyone. Now, the little cowboy introduces himself and says his name is Boone. Patrick was super eager to chat with him, but Omri remembers the scary stuff that happened before. So he says the safest bet is to send Boone back to his world immediately. Just then, Patrick's mom calls out from downstairs, telling him it's time to head home. Before leaving, Patrick begs Omri for a huge favor. He begs him not to send Boone back just yet and let him stay over for one night. After thinking it over for a bit, Omri gives in. Then Patrick tells him to make sure to bring Boone to school the next day because he wants to see him again. Omri agrees to that too. But right before leaving, Patrick drops a major warning on him. He tells him to absolutely never leave Boone and Little Bear alone together. Because back in the day, cowboys and Native Americans were usually bitter enemies. But the moment Patrick heads home, that warning starts coming true. Boone starts wandering around checking out the room, and suddenly his eyes land on Little Bear sitting on the bed. On the other side, Little Bear spots him too. Both of them instantly go on high alert the second they lock eyes. Boone is just about to draw his pistol when Omri jumps right in the middle of them. He quickly grabs Boone and locks him inside a drawer. Little Bear is definitely not thrilled about this. He reminds Omri that he promised he would never bring another toy to life, but he went ahead and made the exact same mistake all over again. Seeing how upset Little Bear is, Omri tries to cheer him up. He takes him out to the backyard garden for a walk. While they're out there, they spot a tiny toy deer that had come alive because of the magic. Little Bear hunts it down and gets super happy. After that, Omri properly buries that Native American who had passed away earlier. Seeing this brings peace to Little Bear, knowing that the man was finally sent off with respect. That night, Omri's mom comes into his room and asks if she should leave the door cracked open. But Omri says it's totally fine to shut it. Once his mom leaves, Little Bear asks him a question. He wants to know if Omri's family knows about him. Omri tells him no, nobody has a clue that he's here. Hearing this makes Little Bear a bit homesick. He starts missing his family and his own world. Then he mentions that he feels incredibly lonely and wishes his wife was here with him. Omri feels super bad looking at how sad he is. The next morning, when Omri opens his eyes, he sees Little Bear and Boone screaming and arguing with each other. Both of them were trying to roast and talk down to each other. Omri immediately steps in and breaks it up. He explains to them that if they're going to live together, they need to cut out the fighting. After that, he mentions that he's taking Boone to school today so Patrick can see him. Hearing this, Little Bear starts throwing a fit, insisting on coming along too. In the end, Omri hides both of them inside a small pouch around his waist and smuggles them into school. The moment they get to school, Patrick excitedly grabs the pouch. But during class, Omri keeps his eyes glued to that pouch. He was terrified that Patrick might open it up and expose their secret to the whole world. Meanwhile, inside the pouch, Boone and Little Bear were slowly starting to understand each other. When Boone finds out that Little Bear lost his wife, he genuinely feels sad for him. Now, the bad blood between them starts to fade. Once class wraps up, the teacher calls Omri over. She wants to chat about the story he wrote. The teacher asks him if he did his homework and researched Native Americans properly. Omri replies that yeah, he actually learned a ton. But right then, his eyes land on Patrick. Patrick was opening up the pouch and was just about to show the toys to another student. Seeing this, Omri sprints over to him and tells him he absolutely cannot do that because these aren't just regular toys. Their arguing catches the teacher's attention, and she walks over too. Now the teacher wants to know what exactly is hidden inside that pouch. But taking advantage of the moment, Omri quickly whispers a warning to Little Bear and Boone to play dead. When Patrick pulls them both out, they don't move a single muscle. Both of them just stand there perfectly still, looking exactly like ordinary plastic toys. The teacher doesn't notice anything sketchy at all. She scolds both boys and tells them to stop picking stupid fights for no reason. Just like that, their secret stays safe. After school is over, Omri gets back home and asks his mom if Patrick can crash at their place tonight. After thinking it over for a second, his mom gives the green light. Right after, Omri shows Patrick a tiny Native American doll that he brought home from school. He figures that this doll could totally become Little Bear's new wife and cure his loneliness. But the second they walk into the house, a whole new mess is waiting for them. When Omri goes to grab the cupboard, it's completely gone from its spot. Seeing this, he runs straight to his brothers to ask if they've seen it. Just then, he remembers that he had hidden his brother Gillen's pet mouse's ball earlier. The moment he hands that ball back, Gillen tells him exactly where he saw the cupboard. After a frantic search, Omri finally tracks down the cupboard. But now, a massive problem slaps them in the face. The magical key was missing. Omri and Patrick start tearing the whole house apart looking for the key, but they can't find it anywhere. Hearing this news makes both Little Bear and Boone completely panic. Especially Boone, because he did not want to be stuck in this modern world forever. He wanted to get back to his own era, the year 1869. A little later, everyone sits down together to watch a movie. But a scene pops up in the movie where cowboys are violently attacking Native Americans. Seeing this gets Boone super hyped up, but it makes Little Bear incredibly angry and hurt. He snaps, grabs his bow, and fires an arrow straight at Boone. The arrow hits Boone dead on. Seeing this completely panics Omri and Patrick. Boone instantly passes out cold on the spot. Omri is freaking out because this time around, Dr. Tommy wasn't there to save the day. Meanwhile, Little Bear immediately realizes he messed up big time. He understands that he let his anger get the best of him and made a horrible mistake. Right around then, Omri's mom walks into the room to wish both boys good night. Before she leaves, she warns them that if they hear any weird scratching noises under the floorboards tonight, not to freak out, because Gillen's pet mouse is probably wandering around down there. Once she leaves, the boys' anxiety shoots through the roof. They were terrified that the mouse might attack Little Bear or the unconscious Boone. So, they decide to take turns staying up on guard duty. But because they were totally exhausted, both of them pass out asleep a little later. Only Little Bear stays awake, watching over Boone the entire night. During the night, Omri suddenly wakes up. Right then, his eyes catch the cupboard key jammed tightly between the floorboards. He tries to fish it out, but the key slips and drops even deeper. Now things were looking seriously bad. That's when Little Bear volunteers to climb down into the dark gap to fetch the key. Omri warns him that the mouse might be down there, but Little Bear fearlessly climbs down anyway. It was a race against time to find the key while dodging a giant mouse. But in the end, Little Bear clutches up, grabs the key, and makes it back up totally safe. Omri breathes a massive sigh of relief. The second he gets the key, he brings Dr. Tommy back to life, so he can patch Boone up. Tommy gets straight to work and starts treating Boone's wound. Watching him work makes something click inside Omri's mind. He realizes that this entire situation has completely spun out of his control. Every single day, some crazy new problem keeps popping up. Because of that, he makes the final call that sending everyone back to their own worlds is the only right thing to do. Patrick is definitely not down with this decision, but Little Bear looks genuinely relieved because that's what he wanted from the very start. Once Tommy finishes up the medical treatment, Omri sends him right back to his battlefield world. A little while later, Boone finally wakes up. The second he opens his eyes, he cracks a hilarious joke that instantly breaks the heavy tension in the room. Right after that, Omri mentions bringing that Native American doll to life so she can be Little Bear's wife. But Little Bear shuts it down immediately. He says he doesn't want to rip someone out of their own world and drag them here. And besides, when he gets back home, his own people will be waiting for him. The next morning, it's finally time for the big goodbye. Boone and Little Bear are both packed and ready to head back to their respective timelines. Boone hopes he drops right back into the exact spot he left, while Little Bear figures he'll land right back in the forest where he was guiding his nephew. Before stepping into the cupboard, he shares a super emotional moment with Omri. He tells him that if Omri were his nephew, he would absolutely send him out into the wilderness to make him brave and strong too. Then he tells him that he now considers Omri a true part of his family. Hearing that makes Omri tear up. Finally, both of them step inside the cupboard. Boone smiles and tells them, "Don't you forget about me." Omri and Patrick promise they'll never forget him. Right before vanishing, Little Bear asks one final question. He wants to know if history books in the future will actually remember his people. Omri answers, "Yeah, you guys will always be remembered, even though the road wasn't easy." Hearing that answer makes Little Bear truly happy and at peace. Then Omri slowly pulls the cupboard door shut. A few seconds later, his friend turns right back into a tiny, ordinary plastic toy. A few days later at school, Omri finishes writing his story. He has no clue where Little Bear is out there in time right now, but he's 100% sure that his friend is happy and safe in his own world. And on that incredibly beautiful and emotional note, the story of this movie comes to an end. So guys, how did you like this movie? Make sure to drop a comment and let me know. If you love this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more epic movie recaps just like this one.